Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Take Your Mark podcast. I'm your host, Emme.
And I'm Ruchi.
And we are so happy that you can join us here today in this momentous occasion where we have video. So exciting.
Woo! I am holding a fake microphone. Sorry, this isn't connected to anything yet, but in the near future we will have real microphones and also be in person, which is going to be sick. So, looking forward to that.
It's kind of funny. We can't actually see each other.
Yeah.
So you guys can see us, but we'll be in the future. I think the next one, right? Because you're moving in back here soon.
I am.
Like this weekend.
Yeah, this weekend, yeah.
That's so exciting. I haven't seen you in like 3 weeks.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's been a month.
It's close to a month, yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't swam in that time at all, so.
Neither have I, don't worry. Don't worry.
Yeah, that is your big life update, is you are moving in soon.
Yep, and I start work on Monday.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I just finished my first week of class.
Woo!
It doesn't
Congrats.
really count as a week, though. Thank you. It was only like 2 days, though. And most of my classes are on Monday, Tuesday, so it kind of wasn't a full week.
Okay.
Yeah. My professors seem nice so far, though. I think I accidentally signed up for classes that are much more work than I thought they would be. But,
you'll get through it.
Is there anything else to say?
Honestly, my life has been pretty boring, so not really on my end at least. But if you want to talk about your Hawaii trip.
Oh yeah. Oh my god. It was really fun. There was a volcano erupting when we were there, which was great. We were staying like literally 2 miles away from it. So like I could walk across the street and go see it. Probably the coolest thing I've ever done in my life. We did a lot of hiking. I saw turtles. It was so fun.
I'm jealous, honestly.
Oh, and I bought chocolate and wine from like a chocolate farm and a winery that we went to when we were there, and they both arrived today. So I'm also very excited about that.
Ooh, we might need a little Instagram update on how it is.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, so I did a wine tasting when we were there. So I've tried all the wine and like can confirm it's good. I don't know if it'll be to your taste, because we do have very different taste in drinks, as we've established.
We do. Very opposing tastes, yes.
Yeah, it skews pretty sweet, so I don't know. I guess we haven't actually talked. You don't like wine that much to begin with, but...
Yeah, I don't really, but I feel like I haven't given it a proper chance, so I feel like I need to try more to really, like, knock it to the curb and be like, I don't like it. So, still open-minded.
Okay. I've promised, like, 5 different people taste tests at this point, but hopefully we can do one, maybe.
Maybe.
But I also bought some chocolate, which was incredible, and it was also cool because we got to see the farm, and it's, like, a, like, ethical, sustainable farm. We got a whole tour of the production process. Okay, this was the craziest thing. So we walk in there and we're making conversation with the person who's like behind the desk waiting for our tour to start. And she asks where we're from. And we tell her. And she's like, oh, like, no kidding, I'm from that area. And then she names a specific neighborhood. That was my neighborhood.
No way.
And then she's like, oh yeah, my daughter went to this elementary school. And I was like, that's where I went to school. So I ran into this person.
Did you know the person?
No. So, I mean, they were a military family, which kind of makes sense why we ended up in these areas. So she was only there for like 2.5 years, and her daughter was a year younger than me.
Okay.
So like, but her name sounded familiar. Like, I feel like I met her.
That's wild.
But yeah, it was crazy. And we were talking to some like neighborhood friends when we got back, and we think we know the exact house that they lived in because we know the people who live there now. And they're like, oh yeah, we bought it from a military family. Like,
that's unreal coincidence.
It was crazy. Because yeah, it was like you know, you meet people who are from the same general area, but we said like the city nearby, and she was like, oh yeah, I'm from your specific place. I'm like, ma'am. So that was crazy.
That's cool.
But yeah, overall, very cool trip. I am so sad to be back where it's cold and snowy. I like the snow.
Yeah.
I could do without the cold.
Yes, the snow makes the cold worth it. And I think you said that to me.
I did. I'm regretting it now, though, because I'm just always cold. But, oh well. I chose to go to school here, so.
Hey, you'll get through it. It's okay.
Yeah.
You'll get
Although
through it.
we got more snow at home, which is like, for context, I live south of here. So I feel like we should have gotten more snow here, and we didn't.
Interesting.
But, oh well.
What can you do?
Oh well. Yeah.
So, today, we want to talk about the competitive side of swimming. So, Emmy, when did you start competing? When did it become serious for you?
So, I started competing on the first swim team I joined when I was 7. I think I've told the story of my first meet back in the first episode where I like refused to get in the water. I was scared to dive in. So, definitely wasn't super serious then. But that team though was a decently competitive team. Like I ended up going to a different country for our championship meet by the end of like my first year competing. So it like I started out really hating it. But then by the end of the first year I was like, oh, okay, this is fun. And I honestly, I think part of the reason at that age that it was fun was because it was something that I was good at. So like I kind of immediately had that feeling of, okay, I mean, I don't remember it super well, but looking back, I can kind of imagine that I was like, oh, this is like, I don't know. Yeah, I'm good at it. I get like congratulated when I do this because I do well at it. And so I think that was honestly kind of my experience with it for the first 2 years as, like the first 2 years of swimming is when I was on that team. So that was kind of my first experience with competing. And then I moved after that and joined my summer team first. And that was a much more like chill, laid back kind of vibe. On my previous team that I'd been on, I was 8 at that point and I'd like competed 200 IM. And then I come to my summer team and the 8 and unders do 25s. So it was a big step back, but it was still like, it was a much more condensed season too, you know, because it was like 6 weeks during the summer and then the rest of the time you're not really doing it. So it was way more laid back, but also still like more competitive because meets were just more frequent. It's like, you know, twice a week you're competing and you get to, you know, it was more social too. Maybe that was just because I was older, but like you get to compete, see your friends compete more and get to know their times and stuff like that. So it was a different vibe, but also still super fun. And then after that, joined my club team. I competed with them less. Like I mostly did that for the practices, but I would still do 2 to 3 meets a year. Mostly like the opens. I think at one point I did 4 or 5 when I made it to some of like I qualified for some of the invitationals. And then I had my big like adrenaline crash issue, which we will definitely get into today. And I basically had to stop competing with that because I couldn't even get through practice without getting like an adrenaline spike. Wow. And that was around, I think that was like a year or 2 before high school started. And then yeah, competed in high school, came to college, and now compete here. I can't really remember like when it became serious for me was like kind of subconsciously when I started having that issue with like getting really bad adrenaline, really bad nerves before I competed. But I don't think I ever had like a conscious moment of, okay, this is something I'm taking really seriously now. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think some people kind of hit that point of it becoming serious, and other people kind of fall off of that point, if that makes sense. Like, some people need it to be serious, other people don't, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And I feel like you, if you want to start talking about your journey with competing, I feel like you fall more into that category where you're like, at least the vibe I pick up from you is that you like need it to be serious.
Yeah,
I could be wrong.
No, you're right. Way to call me out. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, I think I started competing when I was 7, and it was straight off the bat winter swimming, which I think this is consistent everywhere, but at least in my area, winter swimming is more serious than summer swimming. Like, summer swimming was just a bunch of, like, you would go to meets, but, like, you didn't really, there wasn't as much to gain, I guess. There wasn't as much of, like, a championship or, like, a build-up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, I would, in general, I would agree. I do think I was part of a really big summer league, so there was a lot of overlap with the same kids from club, so it still got pretty competitive. But
got you.
I agree. There's less. Yeah, there's less build up to some like big thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it was the same for me. And so, but I started kind of in the like serious part of it. So I started like winter, when there's like a couple championships, like you build up to like league meets, district meets, things like that. I don't know exactly the names anymore because it's been so long, but like there were like big meets it led up to. And so I remember at 7, I didn't really care. It was just another sport I was trying. And then once I kind of got more into it and I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a real shot. And I realized, like you did, I was pretty good at it. So I was like, you know what? I like this. I feel good. Like, I'm getting external validation. So I was like, yeah, I like this. And then I think it really got serious for me when I was trying to make JOs. Like, I was really, really trying. And this is kind of unrelated, but also kind of related. I wrote myself a letter in 2015 to read in 2025. And obviously now it's 2025. So I read the letter, and one of my goals was to make JOs. So I think even back then, I was really serious about, you know, swimming and, like, keeping it going. And, like, it was to the point where I think, like, legitimately, if I didn't do well, it was devastation. I was heartbroken, devastated. Like, I didn't get the time I wanted, or, like, I'm not going to go to the championship meet I want to go to. So for me, it became, honestly, serious super early compared to, like, it's very opposing to your viewpoint, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah. So how old were you when you were, like, trying to make JOs and stuff? Do you remember? I guess it was 10 years ago, if that's when you wrote yourself the letter.
Yeah, so it was probably around, I guess at the time I would have been 11 when I wrote the letter.
Okay.
But I was still trying around 9 and 10, like 10 and under. That's when I was still trying to make JOs, especially for the 50 fly. That was like my event. And I wanted to make JOs. And it was actually heartbreaking. I missed it by like a 10th. I missed the cut by a 10th.
Oh, that's so close.
Yeah, and like as a kid, it was like I was super formidable. So like that thing, like not making it was like so devastating. I mean, in hindsight now, I wouldn't trade it for the world because it's made me who I am today. But like back then, it was like the saddest thing ever.
Yeah, no, it's always hard when you have like those goals that you work towards, and especially in swim. I feel like because the time drops you have are so small, it can be like, oh, I'm only a 10th of a second away. Like I could do that, but you know, you can gain or lose like a quarter of a second just based on how good the timer is. And granted, I mean, a lot of times those club meets had like touch pads on the wall and stuff, but still, like, there's only so much you can do it, like, when you're that close, which somehow, like, sometimes kind of makes me feel better and sometimes makes me feel worse.
Yeah, exactly. But that was my introduction, I guess, into competing, and like it became serious very early on. And I think even to this day, which I think is also an interesting dynamic, is that I feel like because, like I said, it happened to me so early, is that it's been hard for me to kind of let it go. Like when it comes to college meets, obviously this is club swim, it's not as serious. And, you know, I don't want it to be as serious, but still for me it somehow ends up being serious because
yeah.
I think because I grew up with that serious mindset, it wasn't like a thing I got in high school. I got it so early that I think like it's hard for me to kind of let that go.
Yeah. No, it's definitely interesting kind of because I feel like not that I got less serious around when I was like, I think it was like 12 to 14 is when I was like really going through it. And I kind of had to get less serious about it because that was the only way I could compete. Whereas I feel like that's kind of when you kind of internalized a little bit before that, but like when I had to back off is when you were really starting to like go for it.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, that's how the timelines kind of connect, yeah. I think around that age, yeah.
And then for you, I guess, what is kind of the link between how serious you were about it and then your, like, nerves and stuff when you were competing?
So when I started, it was very much no pressure, just swim. And then once I kind of had a goal, it was like, I need to make JOs. I need to make champ meets. I need to, you know, set myself up well for high school, whatever the goal was. Once there were like goals in place, it became like infinitely more pressure. And I honestly, and I will admit this, I put a lot of pressure on myself. And that was kind of the problem, was I put myself through unbearable pressure. And that would almost ruin my races more than help. And I think that also made me very nervous and anxious before races. Like, it wouldn't hit until I was behind the blocks. Like, I would be sitting, I would be watching races, completely fine. The second I was behind a block, it would all hit. Nerves, anxiousness, I would get really clammy, like, not physically ready to swim the race. It was almost like, because I wasn't mentally ready, it almost like inhibited me from becoming physically ready. Like, even though I knew I was physically ready, I've been training for this, but the second the mental block was put in place, it was like, you're not ready. And so that's how it kind of manifested for me specifically. What about you? I know you talked about the adrenaline crash.
But... yeah, so that started kind of out of the blue for me. Like, I had always gotten nervous before. Is gotten a word? It is, right? Yeah, sure. I had always like gotten nervous before. Now that sounds wrong. Oh well. Before races, like, because kind of like you said, like, you want to do well, so you have that kind of internal pressure on yourself. And I feel like because I was pretty good, especially like on my summer swim team, I was typically like the fastest one in my age group and stuff like that. There, even on that, where there isn't like, there aren't stakes attached to it, but, you know, people still want to do well. Like, there are still points to be earned, and there kind of becomes that expectation of like, okay, you're going to do well, right? And I think that was kind of what started it, was both the internal pressure of, oh, I want to do well, and then also the external expectation. And like, kind of like you were saying with, you get behind the block and you have like, physically you just don't feel ready to swim the race anymore. I think I honestly started to notice that as soon as like 8 to 10, because at that point I was getting really close to some of the pool records at my summer pool. And so, you know, I would show kind of like what you were saying with JOs too. It's like, I was a 1/10 of a second off of them. And so like before a race, that would just be all I was thinking about. And I just like, I feel like that just got in the way of me actually being ready to swim sometimes. And I mean, when you're that young, it doesn't do that much. Like, your body burns sugar so fast. I could dive in the pool and it worked out fine. But kind of the major way it started manifesting was when I was like, again, I don't remember exactly how old I was. I want to say that I was 13 or so, because I think it was after a year when I had done like more club meets. Like, I think I went to JOs and stuff and did the whole thing. And then I want to say like the year after that was when I started getting really bad adrenaline before meets. And it started really weirdly because I was at practice and we were like just getting out to do sprints. And all of a sudden I was just like, I have to go throw up. And, you know, people, I don't know about you, but like people threw up at practice sometimes because it was hard. There was actually a coach who would go around and give you like $5 if you threw up at practice. So I got money that day, which was kind of cool.
Yeah. What? That's crazy. We didn't have anything like that. That's crazy.
So it wasn't a super hard practice. So I wasn't thinking like, oh, I just worked so hard, I'm throwing up. It was like I felt completely fine. And then we got out to do sprints and like that happened. And I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, yeah, you know, one time thing, whatever. But then the next time we got out to do sprints, it happened again. And then I forget if I did a club meet or if it was like I got to summer swim, and before every meet I just started to feel so nauseous, and I without fail threw up before every meet. I stopped doing sprints at practice because I was like, I just can't do this right now. But it was weird too because again, it would happen at like low pressure meets too. So like my summer league, they split it up. I don't know if it was the same for you. We had A meets and B meets. So A meets were like the scored meets that were kind of invitationals. There was like 3 people for every event. And then we had the B meets, which was just everyone could go. So I was, and they weren't scored. And I was throwing up before B meets. I was like, this literally doesn't, like consciously, I could be like, this literally doesn't matter.
Right.
But my body did not get the memo. And so I think that went on for a couple years because it was still happening. I think I had gotten it, I kind of like slowly started to get it under control. I still felt absolutely awful before meets. And I think the longer it went on where I was like, oh, I know I'm going to throw up before meets, it made me more nervous because I knew I was going to feel terrible. If that makes sense. It was like anticipating knowing that I was going to feel that made me feel worse.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I kind of slowly got it under control. And then by the time I was in high school, I was like typically not throwing up before meets.
Gotcha.
Typically.
Typically. Oh, that's so sad.
And like, but even then though, I still had to be very conscious of like, you know, I could tell I was feeling nauseous, but I was like, it's fine. It was a very like it was a whole process before meets. I, for a while, like couldn't eat before then because I was like, if I'm going to throw up, I don't want to be throwing up like food. So I would just be having like water and Gatorades that I had some sugar. And then, yeah, it was just, that was kind of how it eventually manifested for me. And then I feel like since then I've been like working my way back to just being a normal, like nervous, excited kind of thing. Because that's how you want to feel. Like feeling a little nervous is good because that's your body, like, again, it's adrenaline. It's your body like getting ready to swim and sending blood to the right places and all that stuff. But it shouldn't make you throw up. So I feel like ever since then I've been kind of working back to a point where I can have that feeling of like, okay, I'm excited, I'm gonna race, but not throwing up.
Yeah. Well, good job. You know, you made it.
Thank you.
Good job. I don't think I've ever thrown up. Like, I've had the feeling of it, you know, I've felt nauseous, but like, I've never like actually physically, it's never physically happened. So
it's unpleasant. Don't recommend it.
Oh, I've thrown up before, but just not swimming. You know what I mean?
No,
that was the clarification.
No, yeah.
But yeah.
But I mean, like,
I appreciate the
pool
advice.
deck, like, being on a pool deck and, like, you're surrounded by people, like, because sometimes, like, I couldn't make it to a bathroom because I was behind a block getting ready to swim, and then, like, throwing up and then being like, all right, time to dive in the water now. It was weird too. Well, I mean, once I threw up, physically I felt way better, but then mentally I felt way worse.
Yeah.
So it was like trade-offs. I mean, it got to a point, once I realized kind of what was happening, like by the time I was in high school, there's sometimes when I would just be like, I just want to throw up because I know I'll feel better after that, and then I can swim.
Got you.
It didn't work like that, but
yeah.
Well, it did work like that, but I was still like, I don't want to throw up. So I usually just stuck it out with feeling terrible. But it was interesting. It only happened before my first event. Once I was into the meet, I was fine.
Okay.
But it was like that lead up to the meet.
Interesting.
So.
And it was only when you were at the pool deck. It wasn't like you beforehand anticipating that you were swimming the next day, for example.
So it would usually start a couple hours before.
Okay.
But that would be more of like what to me I would call just like normal nervous anticipation. So, you know, it's like, oh, I don't feel super hungry because I'm nervous, or like you get that kind of like jittery feeling.
Yeah.
So like that would start earlier.
Gotcha.
The hardcore nausea didn't usually kick in until like, it wasn't specifically being behind the blocks. It was just, I think, closer to when I was swimming.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I got nauseous, but I never physically threw up. But I also experienced a lot of that when I was behind the blocks too. Like beforehand, I would feel butterflies in my stomach. Like I felt that kind of, like you said, the jittery nerves. But then it was always when I was right behind the blocks about to go. That was when I felt like I was nauseous. I felt just clammy, like super. It was almost like I was thrown into like the hottest weather ever. I got sweating, clammy, not wanting to do it, like not wanting to race. Like the second I got behind the block, I was like, why am I here again? Like,
yeah, I hate the sport. Why am I doing this? Yeah.
Yeah, and like the people behind me too were not making it better. Like I wanted distractions. I wanted people to talk to me, but everyone would just say, good luck, as you went up. And so like when anyone says good luck to you, you immediately just start panicking. I mean, at least I would be like, oh my god, good luck, like, oh no.
Yeah,
like...
the same. But I also feel like, though, for me, I like couldn't deal with people talking to me because I just had to be so focused on like stay calm that even like a distraction like that would take me out of staying calm.
Yeah.
So like later in high school, I could like start to handle that, but there were sometimes like, you know, someone in the heat behind me would try and talk to me, and I would just have to be like, I can't talk right now, or I will like throw up on you.
You put the arm out like, stop.
Yeah.
Shut up. Yeah, no, I get you. For me, it was very similar in that like it wasn't always, you know, heat people behind me, but it was also just like people who had just finished. They were also trying to be like, good luck, and you were on the block at the time trying to lock into your race, trying to really be ready before the starter starts and you have to actually dive in. And it was just like good luck was almost like literally made me more nervous. Like someone saying good luck to me, it didn't feel like encouragement. It felt like almost just adding on top of the pressure and the nerves. I don't know why for me, but it just, I hated people for saying good luck. I just was like, tell me good job after, that's great. Don't tell me good luck beforehand.
Yeah. So I feel like for me, that kind of like my nerves were the same no matter what level I was swimming at. I feel like because, I guess I should say, the physical response I had of my nerves was the same at like all levels, you know, summer, high school, whatever. I do think mentally there was like the pressure and the nerves kind of, they did feel different depending on the setting. I'm just kind of curious how that was for you as well.
So for
Like
me,
physically versus mentally.
so I think a lot of the nerves for me manifested mentally more than physically. Like, yes, I had those sort of physical reactions, but it was mainly because I think the root was the fact that I was mentally just like not there. And I think for me, the way it's manifested is like when I was younger, it wasn't really there. Became serious. I started kind of putting that on myself, and then the nerves were always worse at bigger meets where I knew there was stuff on the line. Like, we have a last chance meet before like champs. We had a meet called the last chance meet, and whenever I swam there, it was always the worst because like sometimes your qualification to champs was on the line at that meet, and so if you didn't do well, you weren't going to champs. So it was like, literally the last chance. And it was terrible. It was the worst, like the worst anxiety, worst nervousness ever was that at that meet. But then again, there were other meets where, like dual meets, for instance, like regular dual meets were so like, there wasn't as much pressure because obviously you want to score points, you want to support the team, but at the end of the day, if you do poorly, like, it's not impacting something that's like, you have another chance, you have another dual meet, you have another, like, there's another chance. So it was much better at those meets, I think. So it genuinely just depended on how much was there at that meet that like was on the line. How much was on the line?
Yeah. So is that typically more so like high school and club, as it would be a lot worse for you there?
Yeah, and I think I got better with college, at least to a certain extent, because I kind of started to be like, well, at the end of the day, this is for nationals, and also, like, do I care about nationals? Like, do I really, like, at the end of the day, like, in freshman year, I was like, I want to make nationals. But then after that, I think because school got so much more tough and, like, became a lot more work, I just kind of changed my mindset to be like, hey, this is for your health. This is not for accolades, awards. Like, there's no, like, I kind of changed my mindset in terms of, like, I was swimming for the, like, the times, the awards, the, things of, like, oh, I made nationals. Like, that kind of just, like, achievement. Whereas then I changed it to be like, okay, now I'm swimming for health. I'm swimming to stay fit, stay healthy, so it wasn't about the times or the achievements anymore as much.
Yeah. I think it's interesting though, because for me, having, like, we've kind of said we had opposite journeys, where I feel like in college, I've been kind of trying to work back up to being, like, caring more at meets, not necessarily about my times, but just feeling like I'm racing. Because I feel like when I got here, I had kind of successfully taken the pressure off of competing for the most part. But then I was missing that, like, behind the blocks, oh, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And because of that, like, I didn't race as well. And it was one of those things where, sure, I don't want to care about the times necessarily, because, like, I'm not training as much. I'm not going to be feeling as good as I did. But I'd get out of the water and be like, I could have done better. Not even like oh, darn, that time is bad. But, like, I don't feel like I pushed myself like how I should have, or how I know I could if I was, like, in the right mindset. So I feel like having nationals as, like, a goal to work towards has been, like, it's that motivation to be like, okay, I should show up to practice so that way I can race well.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't know what my conclusion is from that. But there it is.
Well, I guess, it's a form of motivation for you, is like, hey, like, I have this goal I want to get to, so let me put in the effort to get there. For me, it's a very different journey, because it used to be a all or nothing kind of thing of like, okay, like this is do or die. You're either gonna do it or you're gonna die. Like it was that much level of pressure that it like it genuinely kills you. Like I'm telling you, it was like killing level of pressure that I put on myself. And so yeah, my journey has been kind of trying to care less and kind of enjoying the sport itself, because I do love swimming, but I was hitting a point where I was hating competing. And I love competing. I'm such a competitive person. I love it. But at the end of the day, I was hating it because of how much pressure I was putting on myself to be, you know, as fast as possible, you know, as good of a teammate as I could be. So, yeah, my journey is completely opposite to yours, which again, it's a really interesting dynamic.
Yeah. You know, I think one thing that really helped me with like continuing to enjoy competing even after I had all of that stuff that made me kind of like really hate it. Honestly, I mostly hated competing in high school, because that's where like I got the nerves worse, I would say. Summer team, like we've said, it's a much more kind of low-key chill competition, but I feel like that allowed me to like still enjoy doing it. And also it was a much closer community too, because you know there's kids from 4 to 18 who are all swimming together, you know, the parents know you and stuff. And so I definitely, honestly, I probably had more pressure on me there to do well, just because there was a lot more people who cared. But at the same time, I feel like by the time that I was getting over that adrenaline, I was also in like a position of mentorship on that team. Like I was a coach, and we also, at the end of our meets, we did like a mixed stage relay. I don't know if you guys did that, but it's a 200 free relay where you had a 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18.
Oh wow. See, we didn't have anything like that.
And it was the last event of the A meet, and like when you had close meets, sometimes the meet would come down to this one race. And so it was honestly really helpful for me to like be in a position where there's these younger girls by the time I was a 15, 18, it's like, okay, there's these younger girls who, you know, they have all this pressure on them now. And I have to be the one to be like, you know what, guys, it doesn't matter. We're just going to go out there and swim. And like, if you have fun doing it, you will swim faster. And like having to kind of externalize that and like give a voice to it forced me to believe it as well. So I feel like that was really helpful for me for like keeping competing fun, was that like I almost had to pretend to have fun for the little kids, and then eventually it was like a fake it till you make it kind of thing.
Had to gaslight yourself.
I just like I just had to pretend like you're not nauseous, you're having fun, this is a good time, and you're just gonna go out there and have fun. And like the more I told myself that, and it was much easier, I think also in the summer too, like you're outside in the sun, and like there's just better. My summer team has a special place in my heart. I loved it so much. So I feel like that, like I was just able to convince myself that I still like doing it. And then by the time I got to college, you know, I'd taken a year off, and because there's even less pressure here, like I was like, okay, I'm actually missing a little bit of that now. Like it was still fun, but I was missing a little bit of the competitiveness. Yeah.
I get what you mean. Yeah, our summer, I can relate to you on the fact that like summer swim was always a lot of fun. Yeah, not very high pressured. Honestly, summer swim to me just wasn't very high pressure at all. I never really got nervous. That was kind of my fun season of swimming. The other seasons were also fun, but had a lot more nerves, had a lot more pressure and anxiety attached to them. There was a lot more expectations during those seasons. Summer was just kind of in there as like a little fun breather, I guess.
Yeah. And I think for like for me, if we're talking expectations, it's honestly almost the opposite. Like I feel like I had a lot more expectations on me from my summer team, just because like there was more parents there watching. There's the younger kids looking up to you. And I had a reputation. I mean, I had like 5 or 6 pool records. Like I had a reputation of like, okay,
go
you go in there and you get first. Like if Emmy's in a race, she'll win. And so at that point, like that pressure was kind of added on to the whole like competing thing, is that expectation of doing well. Whereas I feel like in high school, and like I stopped competing in club when I had that adrenaline issue. I was like, you know what, I'll keep doing this for practice, but I'm not going to compete here anymore. But even in high school, it's like I feel like individually there was that expectation of like, it was kind of the same thing where people were like, okay, you'll go in there and you'll do well. But because my team sucked, like it didn't really matter as much. Like we weren't going to win the meets anyways, so like people expected me to do well for me, and it was fun. And like there was still that pressure of like, especially because they were harder events in high school, so it was when people expected you to do well, it was a little bit harder to be like, oh yeah, I can whip out a 50. It's like, oh god, I have to do 200 IM. But like it was still like no one cared how the team did. So for me it was flipped, where like I cared a lot more about the outcome on my summer team.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
but then also that was more fun, and where I was able to get over adrenaline sooner. So like, I don't know. The brain is weird. Bodies are weird.
That is the takeaway.
Yeah.
That is the takeaway. The brain is weird. The brain is indeed weird. But yeah, so talking about nerves, what do you do to, deal with nerves and navigate it? I mean, you said you kind of went through that journey, right, of quote unquote getting over your adrenaline crash.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk a bit more about, how you kind of overcame it and how you deal with pressure now, or pressure, nerves, anxiety, all of the above.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to say just because the context now is so different. I mean, maybe it would be different if we were more involved in the club team. But like,
she said nothing. She said nothing. We are super involved, I promise.
Oh yeah, sure.
We swim.
Ruchi can't see me right now, but I am making a face.
Oh, I've been making faces this whole time.
No, yeah, like it's such a different context now. Like it is much more, I mean, it's the same reason that it's hard to show up to work out, is that it's all individual now. There isn't really that same external pressure. But when I was still like on a team in that environment, it came down to, I mean, I guess we talked about this a little bit in the first one, where like I kind of had to teach myself meditation in a way. And it really was just like, okay, I'm just gonna breathe. And once I kind of realized what was happening with like, okay, it's adrenaline, your body is like doing what it thinks it needs to get you ready for the race. You feel bad, but as soon as you swim, you'll feel better. Like I just had to kind of like talk myself through that and very consciously be like, okay, you know why you're feeling this, you're fine. You just have to like make it until you can get in the water. And then you'll be good.
So for you, it really was fake it till you make it.
Yeah, no, it literally was. It was like, just, you are fine. Like, just really convincing myself of that. And it honestly, it took a couple years for that to work. There was, like, again, there was 2 years. There was a year where I probably threw up at, like, every meet. And then another year where it was kind of 50-50 whether I could, like, talk myself through it. And then after that, it got, like, I got much better at it. But I still felt pretty bad for a couple years. Like, it was a whole journey. But, like, it really was a process to get myself to a point where I could, like, before I competed, where I could, like, be good and not not let the demons win, you know?
Yeah. So is it very much for you like kind of a mental conversation you have before races, kind of like a, hey, you're good, you got this kind of conversation that you have in your head?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely, it's changed over the years too. Like, so I feel like when I was younger, there would be, especially when I had, like I said, I had a couple team records. There was more I was working towards, and I had to like, it is definitely a mental conversation, but kind of the course of it like changes depending where I'm at. Because at that point, I kind of realized that like if I tell myself a goal time that I want to get, that's not going to work. I will just be disappointed because I probably won't get it. So I started having to tell myself like, okay, here's these two things that you're going to do during the race. And it was usually like very basic stuff. Like, okay, you're going to kick as hard as you can. And like, you're going to do, say, backstroke, like turnover rate. Just like move your, it, you know, very basic stuff that it's like, yeah, no, duh, you're racing. But like, it gave me concrete things to do during the race rather than just like, you know, go fast, get this time. So I feel like that was kind of the conversation that I had with myself on top of the like, you're fine. Like that was, it was like the you're fine to calm down and then give myself stuff to focus on to kind of like ramp back up, especially once I got through that first event and it was like into the other ones. And then I feel like now, as I've kind of like gotten over that whole thing, I still do like, I think I still do have conversations with myself beforehand, honestly. Because I find that helpful to just like, now it's mostly the like, okay, go in, do these two things, because that's how I know that I'm racing, I guess. How about, what does your little pre-race ritual look like?
So in terms of like, I don't really have, I would say, like a mental conversation or anything. I find that for me, what really has worked, at least in years prior, has been box breathing, which I think I touched on in the first episode. We talked a little bit about meditation. So box breathing was definitely something that helped me. But besides that, this might be really strange. I feel like I have such a like ingrained pre-race ritual now of like, jump up and down a few times, stretch your legs, like do the Phelps, like, you know what I'm talking about? The Phelps back slaps, whatever you want to call it. But I feel like now that I have,
of course you do that.
Yeah. But I feel like now that I have that kind of like ingrained in my head and that it's become a routine to the point where it's like a calming thing of like, okay, like you're ready, you know, you've gone through this whole routine, and I guess in a way it kind of is a mental conversation, but it's much more physical than like me telling myself. It's more so like the physical stretches that I'm doing is like, okay, you're ready, you got it, like, you know, you trained for this, you're ready. And so yeah, I mean, it's worked for me a lot in the past, like back in high school, like when I was first starting the 500 and when that became kind of my event for the rest of eternity, that I used to box breathe before I would swim. And I remember like we had league championships and I actually like, I was so nervous, but honestly, it was interesting because at the same time, I had no expectations. I went into it with no expectations. I was like, there's no goal time, there's nothing. Just swim, see what happens, kind of. That was kind of the mindset. When I did that, I did better than I ever thought I would do. Like, I dropped 15 seconds in my 500.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was after taper and everything. But I went into it with no expectations. I was like, you know what? Who cares what I go? No expectations, just swim. And it was really strange too, because I had like this guy who was counting for me. He never moved the pad, like the board, the counting board. I don't know, what is it called? The counter? No, the counter is the person. The counting board. Is there a name for
I,
it?
I feel like it has a name, but I do not remember. For context, for people who aren't swimmers, when you're doing a long race, they have this like board with numbers on it that you dip into the water so that the person who's swimming can see like how many laps they've done.
Yeah.
And if a person's trying to like make a certain time, the person who's counting laps for them can like swing it side to side or dunk it up and down to like tell them to speed up or like chill for a bit and stuff like that. So
yeah, that was really good. I apologize for not explaining it, but yeah, so
I have been a counter for many a 500 swimmer.
Every meet I had a counter. I never got to count. It was actually so sad, but I had a counter at every meet. And actually in high school, I had like a designated person who was like my counter. Yeah. But, you know, when I had, and they knew my splits that I wanted to hit by heart. It was like, okay, these are the splits. Like, you know, I'll move it up and down. I'll move it faster if you're too slow, but then like a little bit if you're a little off, like things like that. Basically, he did not move, the counter I had did not move the counting board, whatever it's called. Editing Emmy can put that in if she knows what it's called. But the counting board, find out. The counting board, he didn't move it at all, and until the last 200. And I just assumed that he gave up on me. I was like, this man has given up. I am so slow that he just decided I am not going to count for this girl anymore. Like, I'm not going to pay attention. And I was like, so sad. And I touched the wall and I look up and I'm like, oh my God, I was so much faster than my goal time. To the point where he didn't need to shake it because I was hitting the times.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think after that experience, I kind of really trusted the box breathing and the kind of routine process. And yeah, I mean, I still do it to this day. And I think that's really worked for me in terms of like reducing the nerves before racing. So, you know, yeah. Honestly, it is whatever works for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, a kind of like a way of calming yourself down before a race, whether that's like box breathing or like I said, I have like a kind of a conversation with myself. I feel like it is kind of necessary because you get all this like nervous energy built up and you need to be able to like calm your brain down so that you can focus the energy on like, okay, it's time to swim.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. It's not even, it's not
does.
necessarily like a conscious thing. Like when I'm doing it, I'm not thinking like, although I do sometimes think like, oh, I need to save up this energy so that I can actually use it in the pool. But generally speaking, I'm not thinking like, I don't consciously have that thought process of like, okay, I need to calm down. And then, okay, I need to like get myself ready again. But that is kind of the process that you go through. I think just naturally because like you have all this energy built up and it's like too much and then you need to direct it somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of like, it's almost like when you said it energy buildup, the first thought I thought of was a volcano, which I think is really funny considering you said volcano.
I love volcanoes.
At the beginning. But yeah, I was thinking of like that kind of energy release, right? Like when all that lava like flows over when there's an eruption, right? It's similar to that. And that was kind of where my mind went, which I think is really funny. But yeah, I think like, you know, the energy release has to happen. Otherwise it's like, it's literally a mental block of like, you're not ready, but it's like, you are ready. You just need to, you need to lock in. That's what I'm saying. You need to lock in. That's my advice. Lock in.
Yeah. I think that's been something that's been hard for me with club swim is that like, I haven't had that energy build up. So like I can go in and sprint because it's like muscle memory at this point for, you know, for shorter distances. Obviously, I don't think I could pull out a like good 200 IM right now, but like for 50s and even like 100 IM, it's muscle memory. You can dive in and do that.
Yeah.
But I haven't had that like, because it's, you know, way more individual, and especially if I already have the cut time for that event, obviously I still want to do better, but I'm not like, there's nothing riding on it. So it's like recently, not even recently, I think it was sophomore year, but I swam 50 free. And this was after I hurt my shoulder too. Like, I was not expecting to do very well. I think I like dropped an event or something. But two of my friends had come, my mom and then like two of my friends had come to that meet. And so knowing that I had like other people there, like got me all fired up again. And I swim at 24.99, which that is the only time I've broken 25.
I think I was there for that. I remember.
I think you were, yeah.
I think I was there,
but like,
and it was like super cool. You were great.
Yeah, it felt great. But again, I feel like that's like the only time. I mean, nationals is something else, just because that's such a big meet that you end up absorbing the energy of other people, even if there's not really like those stakes riding on it. But like that's the only time I feel like in college that I've had that feeling of being like, okay, I'm ready to race.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I hadn't had that feeling in a while, and I kind of thought that like, oh, I guess I kind like, if I don't really care about the meet, like I kind of thought it was an all or nothing in some ways, where it's like either I'm gonna be ready for the meet but I'm gonna feel kind of nauseous, or like I just don't get adrenaline at all. And so it was interesting to like actually have an experience. Now granted, I did feel a little bit nauseous, but it wasn't bad. But it was like, that's the first time in college that I feel like I actually got that feeling of like, oh my god, it's like, this is competing. There's people who are like, and maybe that just says that I should have more internal motivation and not rely on but at the same time, you know, like having the energy of like a crowd there, like there's something to be said for that, you know?
Yeah. Definitely helps to have a little cheerleading squad, you know? Yeah. So we've been talking about swimming this whole time, but have you actually competed in other sports, at least like seriously, even if you didn't compete seriously, like have you competed in other sports, and what ones were more serious, what ones were kind of just for fun?
So both yes and no, I would say. In high school, I did track for a couple years, and that one like got pretty competitive. I went to districts. I don't think I made it to regionals. Maybe I did. I did pole vault, so I did events that like not a ton of people did, so I could do better. But I competed in that for a couple years, and I would say I had kind of a similar reaction as I did to swim, with adrenaline. Not as bad, but I think I had kind of the same like physical reaction, because that's just how my body reacts when it gets like an adrenaline rush. And then the nerves were more so from it just being like, this is a different sport. This is not something I have as much experience doing. Yeah. Rather, and I want to do well in it, but I just like, I don't have as sure of a footing here. So I think I definitely got a little nervous there. But then in college, I've actually kind of intentionally not gotten competitive with other sports, like with climbing and sailing, which are like my two main other things. Both of them have a competitive option that I haven't done, because I kind of just want to keep them as like fun recreational activities. I don't want to like risk having that pressure on myself. I kind of want to keep that with swim, where it is a familiar territory, where I know how to navigate it. And maybe I would navigate the same way in other sports, but like I just don't know.
Yeah.
You know?
I get what you mean. Yeah. I didn't really try many sports. I mean, like when I was really young I did, but again at that point it was very much a little silly goofy tryout. Like it wasn't like a serious like, hey, you're actually competing, you're trying to, you know, make championships and things like that. There was none of that. But then in high school, like again, I was mainly a swimmer. Again, the swimmer schedule was just so ridiculous for us that I don't think I couldn't have done another sport unless I did like a winter sport and a spring sport. But again, I put all my focus and energy into this one sport, so I was not doing any of that. I did water polo one year, and I talked about it in the last episode.
It was
but
awful.
there was
not you talking about it. Water polo.
Appreciate the clarification. I mean, hey, you can always admit to me if it was awful, but yeah. So when I did water polo, there was no pressure whatsoever, simply for the fact of I knew I was bad. It was like very much a kind of like no expectations. Like I didn't even expect to get a goal. I didn't expect to really do anything monumental. So when I did, it was almost like instead of that kind of like pressure and then like sad if I didn't do it. In this case, I was already kind of at that no expectations point. So if something did happen, it was like on top of the world, unreal. I'm so cool. Like, that kind of, it was a different dynamic altogether. But besides that, no, I didn't really do any other sports competitively except for swim. And so I think that's kind of the reason, that was one of the reasons I think why there's so much pressure and nerves in swim. It's because that's the one thing I really dipped my toes into. In fact, I got in the pool, so it was over the second I got in. It was over. But yeah, it's interesting, I feel like navigating the fact that the thing you brought up, which I find really interesting, is that different sports navigate nerves differently, which I think I really didn't think that much about, because I've been like oh my god, I can't speak. Because I've been like majority a swimmer, I deal with nerves in a certain way that maybe someone who is like a runner or like is in a different sport, competitively, they might deal with it differently, which I never really thought about. But that's actually really interesting.
Yeah. I think even beyond that, kind of what we've shown today is that it's also just on an individual level. It's going to be so different for everyone. And there's not like, I mean, there are more productive ways to deal with it and less productive ways to deal with it. But like the one that works for you may not work for someone else. And like, you can make your nerves work for you. Yeah. You just have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
And it's gonna suck because nerves don't feel good.
Yeah, they don't, unfortunately. But I mean, hey, that's kind of the point of nerves. I think you need a little bit of that to do well. You do need a little bit of that. Yeah. Yeah. So it's really all about finding that balance and finding what works for you and what doesn't work for you. But I mean, hey, feel free to give us credit and use our strategies, because hey, we'll take that. We'll take that.
If you start talking to yourself, let me know.
Yeah, if you start doing the Michael Phelps backslap, I don't know what to call it. We're gonna call it that. The Michael
I think
Phelps.
That's what it is called, honestly.
Okay. If you start doing the Michael Phelps backslap before you do, I don't know, anything that you find nerve-wracking, just, DM the Instagram, follow us, comment, let us know. I'd love to hear your stories, doing it and, using other nerve strategies, because I think it's actually really interesting how many different strategies there are. I mean, we've only covered 3 that have worked for us. So 3 or 4. Yeah.
I didn't keep track. There was a couple in there. You gotta listen to find out. We're not gonna tell you.
We can't count. So we can't count. So count for us, please. But anyway, on that note, I think that's a good note to wrap it up. Yeah, thank you all for listening and watching. You guys should go follow the Instagram at TakeYourMarkPod if you haven't already. Follow, there's no other page to follow. Follow the podcast on Spotify. Comment,
and
rate.
Subscribe on YouTube.
Subscribe on YouTube. We will be posting all those details. Currently, nothing is posted, but it will be posted. And am I missing anything?
I think that's it. So we will see you guys in another 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.
Cue jazzy music.